Is it gonna be fun? Yes, indeed. Em and Mike read.
Hello, I'm Mike.
I'm Em.
And we're reading The Count of Monte Cristo. I think this week it's chapter 17, I believe.
Yes.
And wow, we're still in jail with Dantes, and he's been talking to the Abbé, who not entirely certain how with it he is, but he seemed pretty smart. He certainly knows the jail.
He's
eccentric.
He's
yeah.
eccentric.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of like street smarts within a jail. Jail smarts.
Yeah.
So, and knows how to tunnel and stuff. And I have a feeling we're going to hear more from the Abbé, because this chapter is called Chapter 17, The Abbé's Chamber.
And I'm going to finish some ice cream cake while we do this.
Okay, then I'll start.
Yes, please.
After having passed with tolerable ease through the subterranean passage, which, however, did not admit of their holding themselves erect, the two friends reached the further end of the corridor into which the Abbé's cell opened. So I forgot this, but it sounds like Dantes and the Abbé are heading back to his cell, which is great because Dantes has been in the same room for 6 years, I think, at this point.
At least, yeah. He's like, you want to come back to my place?
And he's like, heck yeah, let's do this. From that point, the passage became much narrower and barely permitted one to creep through on hands and knees. The floor of the Abbé's cell was paved, and it had been by raising one of the stones in the most obscure corner that Faria had been able to commence the laborious task of which Dantes had witnessed the completion. Wow, what a awkward construction, but there you go. Mm-hmm. As he entered the chamber of his friend, Dantes cast around one eager and searching glance in quest of the expected marvels, but nothing more than common met his view. "It is well," said the Abbé. "We have some hours before us. It is now just 12:15 o'clock." Instinctively, Dantes turned round to observe by what watch or clock the Abbé had been able so accurately to specify the hour. "Look at this ray of light which enters by my window," said the Abbé, "and then observe the lines traced on the wall, while by means of these lines, which are in accordance with the double motion of the earth and the ellipse it describes round the sun, I am enabled to ascertain the precise hour with more minuteness than if I possessed a watch, for that might be broken or deranged in its movements, whereas the sun and earth never vary in their appointed paths." This last explanation was wholly lost upon Dantes. Clearly had not read...
Dantes is like, you've been making, books and,
basically reconstructing, Newtonian, ellipses, the sun, the rotations of the spheres of the cosmos.
He's not been nearly as productive.
Yeah, Dantes has been like, if I dip the chicken in my soup, it tastes a little saltier. This last explanation was wholly lost upon Dantes, who had always imagined, from seeing the sun rise from behind the mountains and set in the Mediterranean, that it moved, and not the earth. What?
Dantes thinks that the...
He doesn't know that the earth rotates?
No.
Okay.
He thinks
a sailor?
He thinks it's an earth-based... Yeah, weird, right?
That's really weird as a sailor, because I thought, especially the people on sailboats, navigating by stars and stuff. Yeah, I thought, wouldn't they have to know about basic,
He was only 19
orbital mechanics or something? Okay.
Although he was going to be, captain of the ship.
Yeah, all right. So. Maybe at once they become captain, okay, here's how it all works. Yeah. The sun
here's
is in the middle. The earth moves. A double movement of the globe he inhabited, and of which he could feel nothing, appeared to him perfectly impossible. Oh, Dantes. Each word that fell from his companion's lips seemed fraught with the mysteries of science, as worthy of digging out as the gold and diamonds in the mines of Guzarat and Golconda. Bit of a deep cut there, which he could just recollect having visited during a voyage made in his earliest youth. Come, said he to the Abbé. "I am anxious to see your treasures." The Abbé smiled, and proceeding to the disused fireplace, raised, by the help of his chisel, a long stone, which had doubtless been the hearth, beneath which was a cavity of considerable depth, serving as a safe depository of the articles mentioned to Dantes. Wow, so here's the Abbé. It looks like he's studying for an exam. This is me finishing my calculus exam. This is a
the
still
beard, the same beard.
photo of me doing my final calculus
Same
exam.
robe.
Yep. This is a life photographic proof.
Also,
Same conditions.
I feel like the artist took more liberties again, because in Dantes's cell at least, the window was not nearly that big.
Maybe the Abbe has just a better cell. Like, yeah, I would imagine that back then they didn't have like the sort of the uniformity. They would just like shove you in a hole in a wall.
Yeah, because I thought it was like it went big and then it went like really tiny.
That's
and
the
that
way
was
I
where the
imagine
window
it
was.
too. Is almost like a
It was like a cone.
That's how I saw it in my head as well. Yeah. All right, I'll do a few more paragraphs and then I'll switch over.
Okay.
What do you wish to see first? Asked the Abbe. Oh, your great work on the monarchy of Italy. Faria then drew forth from his hiding place 3 or 4 rolls of linen, laid one over the other like folds of papyrus. These rolls consisted of slips of cloth about 4 inches wide and 18 long. They were all carefully numbered and closely covered with writing, so legible that Dantes could easily read it, as well as make out the sense, it being in Italian, a language he, as a Provençal, perfectly understood. There, said he, there's the work complete. I wrote the word fini at the end of the 68th strip about a week ago. I have torn up 2 of my shirts and as many handkerchiefs as I was master of to complete the precious pages. Should I ever get out of prison and find in all Italy a printer courageous enough to publish what I have composed, my literary reputation is forever secured.
Oh man, can you
Whoa,
imagine?
he's got big plans.
Can you imagine being a printer and some guy comes up to you with a crazy beard and he's like,
I got all these shirts.
Here's my manuscript.
I wrote it with blood.
I wrote it with my own blood. Oh
And
my
wine dipped in fireplace ash. Check out all my old shirts.
God. Oh god. How much will you offer me for this masterpiece?
Trust me, it's the next Harry Potter. I see. All right, I'll do this last bit.
Okay.
I see, answered Dantes. Now let me behold the curious pens with which you have written your work. Take it away.
Okay. Look, said Faria, showing to the young man a slender stick about 6 inches long and much resembling the size of the handle of a fine painting brush, to the end of which was tied by a piece of thread one of those cartilages of which the Abbe had before spoken to Dantes. It was pointed and divided at the nib like an ordinary pen. Dantes examined it with intense admiration, then looked around to see the instrument with which it had been shaped so correctly into form. Ah, yes, said Faria, the penknife. That is my masterpiece. I made it as well as this larger knife out of an old iron candlestick. The penknife was sharp and keen as a razor. As for the other knife, it would serve a double purpose, and with it one could cut and thrust. He's like, we could take out the gun.
This is a weapon.
Dantes examined the various articles shown to him with the same attention that he had bestowed on the curiosities and strange tools exhibited in the shops at Marseille, as the works of the savages in the South Seas, from whence they had been brought by the different trading vessels.
I see you have made a shank.
He's like, nice. As for the ink, said Faria, I told you how I managed to obtain that, and I only just make it from time to time as I require it. One thing still puzzles me, observed Dantes, and that is how you managed to do all this by daylight. I worked at night also, replied Faria. Night? Why, for heaven's sake, are your eyes like cats that you can see to work in the dark? Indeed they are not, but God has supplied man with the intelligence that enables him to overcome the limitations of natural conditions. I furnished myself with a light. You did? Pray tell me how. I separated the fat from the meat served to me, melted it. How?
He's like a MacGyver.
He totally is MacGyver. When are we? 1800s?
This is the mid to late 1800s.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Somewhere in there. Post Napoleon. So late 1800s, yeah. Like Dickens' steam era is how I've been imagining it. But
Okay, yeah. MacGyver the first.
just the beginning of the Industrial Revolution? I don't know.
That's like late 1800s, I think.
Yeah.
I melted it somehow, and so made oil. Here is my lamp. So saying, the Abbé exhibited a sort of torch very similar to those used in public illuminations. But how do you procure a light? Oh, here are 2 flints and a piece of burnt linen. And matches? I pretended that I had a disorder of the skin and asked for a little sulfur, which was readily supplied. He is like one clever son of a gun.
Yeah, this is the guy you want to have in jail with you.
Yeah. Dantes laid the different things he had been looking at on the table and stood with his head drooping on his breast, as though overwhelmed by the perseverance and strength of Faria's mind. He's like, I'm such an idiot.
I had a jug replaced 2 days ago.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's getting completely schooled here. Kind of looks like a pirate. If he had a hat
He
and
does.
a hook for a hand.
With like a plume in the hat.
And I don't know if the artist here is trying to evoke kind of like the Greek philosopher, because I'm kind of thinking of the Abbé as almost like I know he's Italian, but like a Greek philosopher, like not Plato, Socrates, something like that. That's the sort of vibe I'm getting off him.
Totally.
Like the sort of vagabond savant philosopher.
Yeah.
He's the Tony Stark of late 1800 France.
The Abbé
made this
in a cave
with pieces of fish. Just like and some wine and some fat, and he asked for sulfur.
And he's got slippers. Like,
yeah, did he fashion himself some comfy footwear?
I can't imagine they would have given them shoes. What are they gonna need
Good
shoes
question.
for?
Good question.
Okay. You have not seen all yet, continued Faria, for I did not think it wise to trust all my treasures in the same hiding place. Let us shut this one up. They put the stone back in its place. The Abbé sprinkled a little dust over it to conceal the traces of its having been removed, rubbed his foot well on it to make it assume the same appearance as the other, and then, going towards his bed, he removed it from the spot it stood in. Behind the head of the bed, and concealed by a stone fitting in so closely as to defy all suspicion, was a hollow space, and in this space a ladder of cords between 25 and 30 feet in length. Dantes closely and eagerly examined it. He found it firm, solid, and compact enough to bear any weight. Who supplied you with the materials for making this wonderful work? I tore up several of my shirts.
I feel like that's like his
shirts?
go-to building material.
That's right. The guy,
Shirts.
what is he eat? Like, what does he tell the guards?
I lost it again. It's gone. I don't know what goes on. No shirts. They're like, okay, here's another shirt.
I tore up several of my shirts and ripped out the seams in the sheets of my bed during the 3 years imprisonment at Fenestrel.
Oh, he was at a different prison.
Right.
Okay.
And when I was removed to the Chateau d'If, I managed to bring the ravelings with me, so that I've been able to finish my work here.
Where would he have hidden it?
Does he have pockets? Surely they would have searched him.
Yeah, I don't think
Unless
you have
they're
suspicion,
like
possessions.
There's no way. Like, was he gonna take with him rocks?
I guess, like if he had, I mean, that's the perfect time to search them for contraband.
Poor security.
Yeah, maybe let's just chalk it up to poor security.
And like the mad old Abbé.
Yeah.
And they think he's harmless.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. And was it? I like Dantes is like, what the hell? And was it not discovered that your sheets were unhemmed? Oh no. For when I had taken out the thread I required, I hemmed the edges over again.
Wow.
With what? With his needle, said the Abbé, as, opening his ragged vestments, he showed Dantes a long, sharp fishbone with a small perforated eye for the thread, a small portion of which still remained in it.
I also used this sewing machine, which I crafted out of leftover meat and a little bit of spit and elbow grease and some
blood.
Some hair I ripped from my own head.
I once thought, continued Faria, of removing these iron bars and letting myself down from the window, which, as you see, is somewhat wider than yours. Okay, alright. Although I should have enlarged it still more preparatory to my flight. However, I discovered that I should merely have dropped into a sort of inner court, and I therefore renounced the project altogether as too full of risk and danger. Nevertheless, I carefully preserved my latter against one of those unforeseen opportunities of which I spoke just now, and which sudden chance frequently brings about. Take it away.
While affecting to be deeply engaged in examining the latter, the mind of Dantes was, in fact, busily occupied by the idea that a person so intelligent, ingenious, and clear-sighted as the Abbé might probably be able to solve the dark mystery of his own misfortunes, where he himself could see nothing. "What are you thinking of?" asked the Abbé smilingly, imputing the deep abstraction in which his visitor was plunged to the excess of his awe and wonder. "I was reflecting, in the first place," replied Dantes, "upon the enormous degree of intelligence and ability you must have employed to reach the high perfection to which you have attained. What would you not have accomplished if you had been free?" "Possibly nothing at all. The overflow of my brain would probably, in a state of freedom, have evaporated in 1,000 follies. Misfortune is needed to bring to light the treasures of the human intellect. Compression is needed to explode gunpowder. Captivity has brought my mental faculties to a focus. And you are well aware that from the collision of clouds, electricity is produced. From electricity, lightning. From lightning, illumination." And so, like, he's like a philosopher. He's like like the ideal. I don't know. He's just all around really interesting fellow here. "No," replied Dantes, "I know nothing. Some of your words are to me quite empty of meaning. You must be blessed indeed to possess the knowledge you have." The Abbé smiled. "Well," said he, "but you had another subject for your thoughts. Did you not say so just now?" "I did." "You have told me as yet but one of them. Let me hear the other." "It was this, that while you had related to me all the particulars of your past life, you were perfectly unacquainted with mine. Your life, my young friend, has not been of sufficient length to admit of your having passed through any very important events."
Aww.
Whoa! Yeah, your life too short to be at all interesting.
That is like, I hate, that is such
A little bit of ageist.
BS.
"It has been long enough to inflict on me a great and undeserved misfortune. I would fain fix the source of it on man, that I may no longer vent reproaches upon heaven." "Then you profess ignorance of the crime with which you are charged?" "I do indeed, and this I swear by the two beings most dear to me upon earth, my father and Mercedes." "Come," said the Abbé, closing his hiding place and pushing the bed back to its original situation. "Let me hear your story."
And he brought out a fully cooked turkey dinner.
Yeah, he just
That he's been
wheels it out.
hiding.
It's got like the silver dome.
Yeah.
"I'll carve, you talk." All right, why don't you take over?
Okay. Dantes obeyed and commenced what he called his history, but which consisted only of the account of a voyage to India and 2 or 3 voyages to the Levant, until he arrived at the recital of his last cruise with the death of Captain Leclerc, and with the receipt of a packet to be delivered by himself to the Grand Marshal. His interview with that personage and his receiving, in place of the packet, brought... Wait, hold on.
It's a weird construction. Packet brought.
Okay, his interview with that personage and his receiving, in place of that packet, brought a letter addressed to a Monsieur Noirtier, his arrival at Marseille and interview with his father, his affection for Mercedes and their nuptial feast, his arrest and subsequent examination, his temporary detention at the Palais de Justice, and his final imprisonment in the Chateau d'If. From this point, everything was a blank to Dantes. He knew nothing more, not even the length of time he had been imprisoned. His recital finished, the Abbé reflected long and earnestly. "There is," said he, at the end of his meditations, "a clever maxim which bears upon what I was saying to you some little while ago, and that is, that unless wicked ideas take root in a naturally depraved mind, human nature, in a right and wholesome state, revolts at crime. Still, from an artificial civilization have originated wants, vices, and false tastes, which occasionally become so powerful as to stifle within us all good feelings. and ultimately to lead us into guilt and wickedness. From this view of things, then, comes the axiom that if you visit to discover the author of any bad action, seek first to discover the person to whom the perpetration of that bad action could be in any way advantageous. Now, to apply it in your case, to whom could your disappearance have been serviceable?
In Latin, they call this cui bono, who benefits.
Oh,
It's classic.
there you go.
Yeah. You were going to say something?
Thanks, Columbo.
Oh, excuse me.
I was gonna say that I feel like the Abbe is someone who's gonna finally talk sense into Dantes and get to the root of it.
Yeah.
Like, Dantes is like, oh yeah,
Trust in the law.
this guy Fernand is like, yeah, he's pretty nice, but like, he's kind of interested in my girl, but like, no, he's super nice. Like, I feel like the Abbe is gonna get to the bottom of the shit.
And this might actually be the spark that ignites the fury. If
It makes him the Dread Pirate Roberts.
It makes him Dread Pirate Roberts. As soon as Dantes is like, whoa, I've been completely duped here. Bamboozled. Someone pulled a prank on me of epic proportions. Now rage.
To no one, by heaven, I was a very insignificant person. Do not speak thus, for your reply evinces neither logic nor philosophy. Shut up.
Yeah.
Everything is relative, my dear young friend, from the king who stands in the way of his successor to the employee who keeps his rival out of a place. Now, in the event of the king's death, his successor inherits a crown. When the employee dies, the supernumerary steps into his shoes and receives a salary of 12,000 livres. What?
Books?
Okay.
That's a lot of books.
What?
Right.
Well, these 12,000 livres are his civil list and are as essential to him as the 12 millions of a king. Everyone, from the highest to the lowest degree, has his place on the social ladder and is beset by stormy passions and conflicting interests, as in Descartes' theory of pressure and impulsion. I'm sure you know.
Descartes.
You've read Descartes,
Of course.
But these forces increase as we go higher, so that we have a spiral which, in defiance of reason, rests upon the apex and not on the base. Now, let us return to your particular world. You say you were on the point of being made captain of the Pharaon. Yes. And about to become the husband of a young and lovely girl. Yes. Now, could anyone have had any interest in preventing the accomplishment of these two things? But first, let us first settle the question as to its being the interest of anyone to hinder you from being captain of the Pharaon. What say you?
I cannot believe such was the case. I was generally lacked on board, and as sailors possessed the right of selecting a captain themselves, I feel convinced their choice would have fallen on me. There was only one person among the crew who had any feeling of ill will towards me. I had quarreled with him some time previously and had even challenged him to fight me, but he refused. Now we are getting on. And what was this man's name? Danglars. What rank did he hold on board? He was supercargo. And had you been captain, should you have retained him in his employment? Not if the choice had remained with me, for I had frequently observed inaccuracies in his accounts. Good again. Now then, tell me, was any person present during your last conversation with Captain Leclerc? No, we were quite alone. Could your conversation have been overheard by anyone? It might, for the cabin door was open, and... Stay! Now, I recollect. Danglars himself passed by just as Captain Leclerc was giving me the packet for the Grand Marshal. That's better, cried the Abbé. Now we are on the right scent. Did you take anybody with you when you put into the port of Elba? Nobody. Somebody there received your packet and gave you a letter in place of it, I think. Yes, the Grand Marshal did. And what did you do with that letter? Put it into my portfolio. You had your portfolio with you then. Now, how could a sailor find room in his pocket for a portfolio large enough to contain an official letter? You are right. It was left on board. Then it was not till you returned to the ship that you put the letter in the portfolio. No. And what did you do with this same letter while returning from Porto Ferraio to the vessel? I carried it in my hand, so that when you went on board the Pharaon, everybody could see that you held a letter in your hand. Yes. Danglars as well as the rest? Danglars as rest as well as others. Now, listen to me and try to recall every circumstance attending your arrest. Do you recollect the words in which the... What is happening to my accent? Allo? Sis? Bonjour? Now, listen to me and try to recall every circumstance attending your arrest. Do you recollect the words in which the information against you was formulated? Oh, yes. I read it over 3 times, and the words sank deeply into my memory. Repeat it to me. Dantes paused a moment, then said, This is it, word for word. The king's attorney is informed by a friend to the throne and religion that one Edmond Dantes, mate on board the Pharaon, this day arrived from Smyrna after having touched at Naples and Porto Ferraio, has been entrusted by Murat with a packet for the usurper, again by the usurper, with a letter for the Bonapartist Club in Paris. This proof of his guilt may be procured by his immediate arrest, as the letter will be found either about his person, at his father's residence, or in his cabin on board the Pharaon.
Wait. This is the letter.
This is the letter
Which
of
letter?
accusation. That, remember whenever Danglars, Fernand, and
Yeah.
Caderousse were right? This is the letter that...
And where did he read that from? Did Villefort let him see?
De Villefort may have read the accusation out at him or something, or he saw it from there. That's the only place I can think of he would have seen it.
Because, I thought that was the whole thing. He didn't. Okay, I don't remember. Maybe he did, yeah.
Okay.
Must have been Villefort.
All right, I'll do one more paragraph. The abbe shrugged his shoulders. The thing is clear as day, said he, and you have had a very confiding nature, as well as a good heart, not to have suspected the origin of the whole affair.
And those have been incredibly stupid.
Yes, you're just a little stupid, just little puppy.
What a dummy.
What a dummy. What a little dummy. Take it away.
Do you really think so? That would indeed be infamous. How did Danglars usually write? In a handsome, running hand. And how was the anonymous letter written? Backhanded. Again the abbe smiled. Disguised. It was very boldly written if disguised. Stop a bit, said the abbe, taking up what he called his pen, and after dipping it into the ink, aka punctured into his arm, he wrote on a piece.
Au moment! Go! What you were saying.
I can't continue. He wrote on a piece of prepared linen with his left hand the first 2 or 3 words of the accusation. Dantes is so stupid. Dantes drew back and gazed on the abbe with a sensation almost amounting to terror. How very astonishing, cried he at length. Why, your writing exactly resembles that of the accusation. Simply because that accusation had been written with the left hand. And I have noticed that... What? That while the writing of different persons done with the right hand varies, that performed with the left hand is invariably uniform. You have evidently seen and observed everything. Let us proceed. Oh, yes.
He's like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, totally. Now, as regards the second question, I'm listening. Was there any person whose interest it was to prevent your marriage with Mercedes?
It's almost improbable accuracy. He is just really narrowing in on the problem.
Yes, a young man who loved her. And his name was... Fernand. That is a Spanish name, I think. He was a Catalan. You imagine him capable of writing the letter? Oh no, he would more likely have got rid of me by sticking a knife into me. That is in strict accordance with the Spanish character.
A little stereotype
A
there.
little bit of a stereotype. An assassination they will unhesitatingly commit, but an act of cowardice, never. Besides, said Dantes, the very circumstances mentioned in the letter were wholly unknown to him. You had never spoken of them yourself to anyone. To no one. Not even to your mistress. No, not even to my betrothed. Then this is Danglars. I feel quite sure of it now. Wait a little. Pray, was Danglars acquainted with Fernand? No. Yes, he was. Now I recollect. What? To have seen them both sitting at table together under an arbour at Père Pamphil's blah, blah, blah. To have seen them both sitting at table together under an arbour at Père Pamphile the evening before the day fixed for my wedding. They were in earnest conversation. Danglars was joking in a friendly way, but Fernand looked pale and agitated. Was they alone? There was a third person with them who I know perfectly well. Wow, I went a little British there. And who had, in all probability, made their acquaintance. He was a tailor named Caderousse, but he was very drunk. Stay! How strange that it did not have occurred to me before. Now, 6 years in here. Now I remember quite well that on the table round which they were sitting were pens, ink, and paper.
And a photo of myself with a cross through it.
Yeah.
With a knife through the forehead.
Now I remember. Oh, the heartless, treacherous scoundrels! Exclaimed Dantes, pressing his hand to his throbbing brows.
We're both experiencing a little accent drift, but I think we're
know.
going to be okay.
I know.
Is there anything else I can assist you in discovering besides the villainy of your friends? Inquired the Abbé with a laugh. Anything else? Any other mysteries? Maybe like, whoa, that cat you lost when you were 10 years old? I know exactly where the cat is. He's in the boat. He's in the boat. Yes, replied Dantes eagerly. I would beg of you, who see so completely to the depths of things, and to whom the greatest mystery seems but an easy riddle, to explain to me how it was that I underwent no second examination, was never brought to trial, and above all, was condemned without ever having had sentence passed on me.
Oh
Here
my
we
God.
go. This is it. This is
All
where
the villains.
Villefort is just, come on, do it, Abbé.
All the villains.
That is altogether a different and more serious matter, responded the Abbé. The ways of justice are frequently too dark and mysterious to be easily penetrated. All we have hitherto done in the matter has been child's play. If you wish me to enter upon the more difficult part of the business, you must assist me by the most minute information on every point.
He's like,
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah. Here we go. Pray, ask me whatever questions you please, for, in good truth, you see more clearly into my lives than I do myself. In the first place, then, who examined you? The king's attorney, his deputy, or a magistrate? The deputy. Was he young or old? About 6 or 7 and 20 years of age, I should say. So, answered the Abbé, old enough to be ambitious, but too young to be corrupt. And how did he treat you? With more of mildness than severity? Did you tell him your whole story? I did. And did his conduct change at all in the course of your examination? He did appear much disturbed when he read the letters that had brought me into this scrape. He seemed quite overcome by my misfortune. By your misfortune? Yes. Then you feel quite sure that it was your misfortune he deplored. He gave me one great proof of his sympathy at any rate, and that he burned the sole evidence that could at all have criminated me.
have
Criminated. Interesting choice. Criminated. I'm speaking lawyer too, Abbé. I too am smart. Criminated.
Yeah.
I read it in a book. What, the accusation? No, the letter. Are you sure? I saw it done. That alters the case. This man might, after all, be a greater scoundrel than you have thought possible. Upon my word, said Dantes, you make me shudder. Is the world filled with tigers and crocodiles? Is it just lasers and bombs everywhere? Yes.
He's just magooing his way through
Just
life.
Mr. Magooing my way through life. Yes, and remembers that two-legged tigers and crocodiles are more dangerous than the others. Never mind, let us go on. With all my heart, you tell me he burns a letter. He did, saying at the same time, you see, I thus destroy the only proof existing against you. This action is somewhat too sublime to be natural. You think so? I am sure of it. To whom was this letter addressed? To Monsieur Noirtier, Rue Coqueron, numero 13, Paris? 13? Ah, yeah. Mais oui. All right, I'll do these 2 paragraphs and I'll hand it over. Now, can you conceive of any interest that your heroic deputy could possibly have had in the destruction of that letter? Why, it is not altogether impossible he might have had, for he made me promise several times never to speak of that letter to anyone, assuring me he so advised me for my own interest, and more than this, he insisted on my taking a solemn oath never to utter the name mentioned in the address. Which
Here
you just
we
broke.
go. Here
Which
we go.
he just broke. All right, take us home.
I think all previous odes are at the
I think, yeah, expired.
Okay. Noirtier, repeated the abbe. Noirtier. I knew a person of that name as a cult of the Queen of Etruria. A Noirtier who had been a Girondin during the Revolution. What was your deputy called? De Villefort. The abbe burst into a fit of laughter.
Oh, you're screwed!
Oh, you poor little
You dummy!
brother ever. While Dantes gazed on him in utter astonishment. What ails you? He said at length. Do you see that ray of sunlight? I do. Well, the whole thing is more clear to me than that sunbeam is to you. Poor fellow, poor young man. And you tell me this magistrate expressed great sympathy and commiseration for you. He did. And the wealthy man destroyed your compromising letter. Yes, and then made you swear never to utter the name of Noirtier. Yes. Why, you poor... Here we go.
You buffoon!
Why, you poor short-sighted simpleton. Can you not guess who this Noirtier was, whose very name he was so careful to keep concealed? This Noirtier was his father!
Pulls a curtain and just like,
Yeah.
there it is.
Had a thunderbolt fallen at the feet of Dantes, or hell opened its yawning gulf before him, he could not have been more completely transfixed with horror than he was at the sound of these unexpected words. Starting up, he clasped his hands around his head as though to prevent his very brain from bursting, and exclaimed, "His father! His father!"
I think this is old school way of saying his mind was blown.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, his father, replied the abbe.
That's like a Darth Vader sort of situation.
Yes.
Well, and for Dantes, I mean, the reader has known the whole time.
That's true. His right name was Noirtier de Villefort.
Bum, bum, bum.
At this instant, a bright light shot through the mind of Dantes and cleared up all that had been dark and obscure before. The change that had come over Villefort during the examination, the destruction of the letter, the exacted promise, the almost supplicating tones of the magistrate, who seemed rather to implore mercy than to pronounce punishment, all returned with a stunning force to his memory. He cried out and staggered against the wall like a drunken man. Then he hurried to the opening that led from the abbe's cell to his own and said, "I must be alone to think over all this." When he regained his dungeon, he threw himself on his bed, like Belle in Beauty and the Beast, where the turnkey found him in the evening visit, sitting with fixed gaze and contracted features, dumb and motionless as a statue, just like...
I can't believe 6 years.
During these hours of profound meditation, which to him had seemed only minutes, he had formed a fearful resolution and bound himself to its fulfillment by a solemn oath.
Galvanizing. Here we go. Revenge time.
Galvanize. Dantes was at length roused from his reverie by the voice of Faria, who, having also been visited by his jailer, had come to invite his fellow sufferer to share his supper. The reputation of being out of his mind, though harmlessly and even amusingly so, had procured for the abbe unusual privileges. He was supplied with bread of a finer, whiter quality than the usual prison fare, and even regaled each Sunday with a small quantity of wine.
What?
Now this was a Sunday, and the abbe had come to ask his young companion to share the luxuries with him.
So if you like feign back then, if you're like, oh,
I'm
cookie
crazy.
pants, I got chicken for pants, then they're like, all right, here's better food. All right, good to know.
Pretty sweet. Tell you.
Dantes followed him. His features were no longer contracted, and he now wore their usual expression. But there was that in his whole appearance that bespoke one who had come to a fixed and desperate resolve. Faria bent on him his penetrating eye. I regret now, said he, having helped you in your late inquiries, or having given you the information I did. Why so? Inquired Dantes. Because it has instilled a new passion in your heart, that of vengeance. Dantes smiled. Let us talk of something else, said he. Again the abbe looked at him, then mournfully shook his head. But in accordance with Dantes's request, he began to speak of other matters. The elder prisoner was one of those persons whose conversation, like that of all who have experienced many trials, contained many useful and important hints as well as sound information. But it was never egotistical, for the unfortunate man never alluded to his own sorrows. Dantes listened with admiring attention to all he said, some of his remarks corresponding with what he already knew, or applied to the sort of knowledge his nautical life had enabled him to acquire. A part of the good abbe's words, however, were wholly incomprehensible to him, but like the aurora which guides the navigator in northern latitudes, opened new vistas to the inquiring mind of the listener, and gave fantastic glimpses of new horizons, enabling him justly to estimate the delight of an intellectual mind would have in following one so richly gifted as Faria along the heights of truth where he was so much at home.
Wow. Also, do auroras guide? Are they used for navigation?
I don't know. I mean, north? They come from the north, generally.
I would have thought they would be poor for navigation because they kind of like dance around.
And you know what? I don't think it's restricted to the north. From the Aurora Australis, isn't there? We don't know. We don't know weather.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. This information does not exist.
No one can look at Google and find out.
You must teach me a small part of what you know, said Dantes, if only to prevent your growing weary of me. I can well believe that so learned a person as yourself would prefer absolute solitude to being tormented with the company of one as ignorant and uninformed as myself. If you will only agree to my request, I promise you never to mention another word about escaping. The abbe smiled. Alas, my boy, said he, human knowledge is confined within very narrow limits, and when I have taught you mathematics, physics, history, and the 3 or 4 modern languages with which I am acquainted, you will know as much as I do myself. Now, it will scarcely require 2 years for me to communicate to you the stock of learning I possess. 2 years? Exclaimed Dantes. Do you really believe I can acquire all these things in so short a time? Not their application, certainly, but their principles you may. To learn is not to know. There are the learners and the learned. Memory makes the one, philosophy the other. But cannot one learn philosophy? Philosophy cannot be taught. It is the application of the sciences to truths. It is like the golden cloud in which the Messiah went up into heaven. I'm going to go to here where it says and German. How far are we from the bottom? Holy smokes. We might have to cut off at some point. There's a lot left in this chapter. We might need to take a break and come back to this next week. All
right.
Maybe let's make it to
After the dialogue? Yeah.
after the dialogue. Okay. Well then, said Dantes, what shall you teach me first? I am in a hurry to begin. I want to learn. Everything, said the abbe. Everything!
But like, what first though? Like
everything, all at once. Here we go. Brace yourself. And that very evening, the prisoners sketched a plan of education to be entered upon the following day. Dantes possessed a prodigious memory, combined with an astonishing quickness and readiness of conception. The mathematical turn of his mind rendered him apt at all kinds of calculation, while his naturally poetical feeling threw a light and pleasing veil over the dry reality of arithmetical computation or the rigid severity of geometry. He already knew Italian, and had also picked up a little of the Romaic dialect during voyages to the East, and by the aid of these 2 languages he easily comprehended the construction of all the others, so that at the end of 6 months he began to speak Spanish, English, and German.
Nice.
Take it away.
In strict accordance with the promise made to the abbe, Dantes spoke no more of escape. Perhaps the delight his studies afforded him left no room for such thoughts. Perhaps the recollection that he had pledged his word, on which his sense of honor was keen, kept him from referring in any way to the possibilities of flight. Days, even months, passed by unheeded in one rapid and instructive course. At the end of a year, Dantes was a new man. Dantes observed, however, that Faria, in spite of the relief his society afforded, daily grew sadder. One thought seemed incessantly to harass and distract his mind. Sometimes he would fall into long reveries, sigh heavily and involuntarily, then suddenly rise and with folded arms begin pacing the confined space of his dungeon. One day he stopped all at once and exclaimed, if there was no sentinel! There shall not be 1 minute longer than you please, said Dantes.
There shall not be
There
one.
shall not be one, a minute longer than you please, said Dantes, who had followed the working of his thoughts as accurately as though his brain were enclosed in crystal so clear as to display its minutest operations. I have already told you, answered the Abbé, that I loathe the idea of shedding blood. And yet the murder, if you choose to call it so, would be simply a measure of self-preservation. No matter, I could never agree to it. Still, you have thought of it. Incessantly, alas, cried the Abbé.
I have sought strangulation and bludgeoning.
And using my little cartilage pen and stabbing him in the eye.
Yes, I have constructed this weapon.
I've
constructed
made
a cannon.
Gatling gun.
But alas, and he throws it against the wall, breaking it. I cannot.
And you have discovered a means of regaining our freedom, have you not? Asked Dantes eagerly. I have. If it were only possible to place a deaf and blind sentinel in the gallery behind us, or beyond us. He shall be both blind and deaf, replied the young man, with an air of determination that made his companion shudder. No, no, cried the Abbé. Impossible! Dantes endeavored to renew the subject. The Abbé shook his head in token of disapproval, and refused to make any further response. 3 months passed away. Are you strong? The Abbé asked one day of Dantes. The young man, in reply, took up the chisel, bent it in the form of a horseshoe, and then as readily straightened it.
That was a precious tool. I can't believe you. Like, there's only one. I can't believe you did that. You weakened the metal. Great job. Could have just said yes.
Fuck you, Dantes. I mean, seriously.
Come on.
And will you engage not to do any harm to the sentry, except as a last resort? I promise on my honor. Then, said the Abbé, we may hope to put our design into execution. And how long shall we be in accomplishing the necessary work? At least a year. And shall we begin at once? At once. We have lost a year to no purpose, cried Dantes. Do you consider the last 12 months to have been wasted? Asked the Abbé. Forgive me, cried Edmund, blushing deeply. Tut tut, answered the Abbé. Man is but man after all, and you are about the best specimen of the genus I have ever known. Do you want to, get a coffee sometime?
You're pretty cool.
Come. Let me show you my plan.
Whoa! Boom! Hey,
Boom,
this is a great
shakalaka
chapter. There's so much here that I love. What I really like is finally Dantes knows what's going on.
The
Like,
veil has been lifted.
yeah, all this tension that's been building up of being like, what? Why the world is like finally
Everyone
released.
is so nice around me.
Yeah,
They would never do anything.
and now he's like, it's like kind of what we predicted. Now it's like revenge
Yes.
mode, and now it's just like got to get out, and he's got like,
Montage.
yeah,
like,
that's exactly it. Like there's like this training montage happening, but it's all like cerebral training.
Yeah.
But it's also like, are you strong? Sure, I bend this thing in half. But like he's also like learning all these languages because apparently that's useful to breaking out of jail.
Yeah, if you're going to be the Dread Pirate Roberts, you're going to travel around and
You got to be cultured.
get your treasures and
You got to show off.
you got to
And, it's possible that during this time, Faria, the Abbé, was also slowly convinced that, if push comes to shove and we have to take out that guard, okay. I don't know why they can't just knock him out. Although, pro tip, I remember reading this, is that if you, like in television shows and movies, they make it seem pretty straightforward to just sort of like conk someone on the head and then they're out and you go like, whew, they've been taken out of the equation and I don't have to think about it. When in actuality, if you're able to hit someone hard enough to knock them out, almost certainly you've caused brain damage.
at least a little.
Straight up brain damage.
Would they not know that someone could be knocked out without killed? Like maybe
They
that,
must.
maybe
They
that
must.
just information just hasn't been.
As a sailor, I feel like accidents happen.
Yeah.
Like a boom swings past and knocks someone cold. Like, it's not like being
I
knocked
guess-
unconscious was discovered in the 1800s.
But
Like,
then the guard could wake up and give information.
I guess.
Is that, I don't know. Maybe that's
You bring the guard with you. That's what you do. No, you don't bring the
Mm.
guard with you. You gotta hide the guard. Stash the guard away. Actually, so that's really interesting. We don't really know his plan. And I think, I don't know, because I haven't really read beyond what we just read, whether or not the author is going to tell us the plan or it will be revealed to us
I think it'll be revealed. I think this whole journey is we go step by step.
with them.
With
And
them.
like they know the plan, but we don't know the plan. That'd be kind of cool. And it's a very sort of modern thing, I think. Like,
I don't know.
I would be pleasantly surprised if a book this old would do such like a modern
I think
thing.
it'll be revealed like as they do it. Like I think he'll explain. I think Dantes will be like, "What now?" And they'll be like, "Okay, open the bars, the window with your strength," and then he'll be like,
Oh, so even Dantes won't know the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting.
I
Because
don't
because
I guess.
definitely there's the other way around, like the dramatic irony of like the audience knows a thing, but the characters don't know a thing. It's like, oh no, they're brother and sister, or something like that. That's dramatic irony. This is the opposite, where we, the audience, are ignorant, but the characters know a thing and they aren't telling us. I don't know if this is true, but I suspect that's a more modern modern device.
"Maybe this was the book where it was invented."
Maybe.
We
Or
found-
maybe
we
this is
found
the
it.
author being like, I don't actually know the plan yet. I'm working it out chapter by chapter. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I've actually, so in studying how some, like, kind of like amateur writing, amateur storytelling, and like self-publishing and stuff, there's like two schools of thought for writing a book: plotters and pantsers. And I never knew what a pantser was, but now I understand. A plotter is someone who like they've plotted out the entire book and they've got like it broken down into beats and chapters and beats and like character arcs and all that. And then there's pantsers, and that stands for flying by the seat of your pants. So like you just kind of sit down and let's see what happens. Let's
But
see when
you-
we bang something out.
I've heard it as well. Like a pantser will like drop a couple seeds in the garden, and then like
See what
flowers will
happens.
and see what happens, and then they kind of let the world grow, and they just like watch it.
Right.
So they're not like
they're letting instinct kind of do it.
they're letting
as
like the
they're-
world develop itself. Like they're kind of following the characters instead of
That's wild.
leading the characters.
That almost sounds mystical. Like, you know what? I don't even need to do the work. I just need to put my hands on the keyboard and the buttons just press themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, I don't know how that mechanism works, but it sounds neat. Anyways, I wonder which one Alexander Dumas is. Like, is he a plotter or a pantser? I
He's
suspect.
definitely a plotter.
You think he's a plotter?
Oh, for sure.
Part of me thinks he might be a pantser. Simply because of how long this book is.
True, and there's been like so many like this has been so super enjoyable so
Yeah.
far, but it could have been like definitely truncate. Like we could have gotten
Yeah, this
This
could be.
point.
We could be in chapter 4 and gotten here, and I
Yeah.
think that would have been reasonable.
yeah.
Maybe the chapters would have been a bit longer, but I think we could have
You're
gotten
right.
here pretty
It
quickly.
was a periodical, wasn't it?
It was a periodical, and that's why I also kind of think he's a bit of a
It's like
pantser.
stretching it all out.
Yeah, what's gonna happen now? Like, what's gonna make the audience? And he's probably like reading or hearing from people being like, "Oh, it was a good chapter." Like, I'm really excited to hear what the next
What
installment's gonna
character
be
they
like.
like? I'll bring him in the next.
Yeah,
one.
exactly. So all of a sudden, like the turnkey is like the smash hit. Everyone wants to hear about the turnkey. All of a sudden, Faria is knocked senseless, and the turnkey's like, "I would help you break out." They're really paying attention to Twitter on like exactly who's the favorite character. All right. Anyways,
Awesome.
that was a pretty great chapter so far. That was part 1 of chapter 17. We'll continue with part 2 of chapter 17 probably next week. That was a lot of fun.
Or hopefully later this week.
Or hopefully later this week. We'll see how it
Get our
goes.
stuff together.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot. I'm Mike,
I'm on.
and we're reading Count of Monte Cristo, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.